I'm Kendall Rawls with the Rawls Group, and I'm here to welcome you to our discussion. Consider us your tribe of sorts, where we chat about all things related pretty much to anything. As your tribe, we provide 5 different perspectives from our unique view of the world. We are pioneers, trailblazers, go-getters, power professionals, marvelous moms, friends, dog lovers, and so much more. Our discussions span from leadership, business, relationships, and personal growth, and everything in between. Here we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our Partners in Collaboration and Boss Women and just this learning environment. And for today's topic, there was an article that I recently saw on franchising.com. It's one of the avenues that I find content and that we partner with them as well at the Rawls Group. And the title of it was Lead Like a Girl, which I thought was so interesting. I felt like it was a take on throw like a girl or run like a girl. And the author of the article, Nancy O'Reilly, she has written a book called Leading Women, 20 Influential Women Share Their Secrets to Leadership, Business, and Life. And it went through what they thought were the top 5. It's going to be a two-part article, and I'll put the link down in the body or below the video. But in this, they highlighted 5 areas. And just for the listener or the person who's watching, I'm going to go through them real fast, and then we're going to open up for discussion with the group. So in Lead Like the Girl or Like a Girl, there were 5 ways that were feminine strengths that basically what they said was men can learn these strengths because behavior is learned, but these are innate strengths as a woman that we have. And one of them was reframe your ideas about power, where most often in leadership, what we were taught, because you're taught from what you see, was leadership was all about having to be super strong and forceful, where what's really cool about women is our feminine power, and it's more about how we want to come together with our goals and not force someone to make it about us. The other one was don't try to be the strong silent type. So oftentimes women get a bad rap because we're chatty and we're gossipy and we feel like we use too many words in a meeting. And basically what they said in this article was that men generally take more of the floor in a meeting than women do. And that women are more insightful. And it's about, in the way that women talk, and I'm reading it because I thought this line was so cool, was that research has found that women talk to exchange information and establish cohesion, where oftentimes men speak whenever they haven't gone through coaching and learn different behaviors to overpower or try to control the room. Another strength for leading like a girl is asking for help. So women naturally will ask for help. They'll say, hey, what's your advice? Or how can we come together? And as we all know, or at least I have experiences, men oftentimes don't want to ask for help. They don't want to read the instructions. If they get lost, they remain lost. And oftentimes women are the first person to say, let's ask someone for directions. The 4th one was to take to the podium woman style, which is basically what we're providing as an example here, to have your voice, show your voice, because there's a lot of women out there who aren't stepping up to the podium. And then the 5th one was shift your perspective, and theirs too. So what's so cool about this article that they talked about is that women naturally look at failure as feedback. And that we're looking at failure, or not even a failure, but we're looking at something that may not be going right as an opportunity to creatively problem solve. So I just gave a summary for the listener or the watcher of these top 5 things. And I feel like I've been talking a lot. So I want to throw it out to the group. What comments or thoughts do you have based upon this article?
Hey, Kendall, I want to chip in because this totally speaks to me, and I sure hope that it speaks to each and every one of the listeners. May you be male or female, because as more women are taking the stand in business, may it be male-dominated industries or not, there's a lot that men can learn from women. There's a lot that men can, it's like, oh, don't cry like a girl. That's kind of what comes up for me as you're talking about this article. Why not? You know what? It's actually, if that's one thing that men can learn, is show vulnerability. I mean, if it's the only thing that you learn, because there's so much that falls within that, and being vulnerable and really allowing yourself to not be strong. Well, guess what? I think in my book, vulnerability is a strength, and allowing that vulnerability to show and be able to actually see from other people's perspectives would make working with each other with men a lot easier, I think, because often as females, as women, we're being seen as, too much. Like you said earlier, we're too talkative, or we're too sensitive, or we're too whatever, fill in the blanks. What if we are simply enough, just like everyone else?
So good.
Brigitte, I'd like to chime in on the vulnerability piece, because I think that that's one of the key elements in terms of what we're seeing in leadership transition today, regardless of gender, like you're saying. So I believe that vulnerability is a big piece that's coming into this next generation of leaders and who we have to be as we go forward at home and at work. It's not just a workplace environment type thing. And what I found over the years working in the careers I have and being in male dominated professions, and quite honestly, even at home with my husband, we have 2 boys as well as 2 girls, is that the simple word vulnerability can sometimes bring in this feeling of, if I'm vulnerable, I'm weak. And it's really educating and getting a person that believes that to embrace that it is not weakness at all. And one of the strengths women have is that we're not afraid to be vulnerable, and we're not afraid to be empathetic, which is also a piece of vulnerability. So I think a big piece of this is really lending ourselves to, how do we help people become more comfortable being vulnerable and not feeling as though it's a weakness, and actually grabbing onto it as power. And the more vulnerable you are, the more power you have in certain situations, and the better that you can lead. And we're all in service of others. I like how Brigitte says that. And I think in servant leadership, that's one of the big things. We have to lead by example. So embracing vulnerability, I think, is a big piece of that.
There's this saying out there about from Betty White. I'm not going to quote it here because it can be a little off color. But for those of you who want to see it, and I will say the first part, which will give a little bit of a cue, but most people will say, grow some balls, be more like a dude. So if you're interested in the perspective of a woman and essentially what they can take and what they can problem solve, which I think is so amazing, look up the quote by Betty White about balls.
I second that totally.
She's a classy lady.
And I think it's a classy quote too, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. What I loved about the article too, was it did talk about that. These are all learned. I mean, everything is learned, and a male can just as much learn these behaviors and skills that are maybe more natural to a woman. And I think it uncovers what oftentimes women have wanted to hide or pretend that's not there. Amy and I did a presentation with Women in Energy, and we're talking about finding your leadership voice. And it was, the voice of a leader, of a woman leader, could be quiet. It doesn't necessarily have to be this loud, powerful voice that most often people think a type A leader has to be. It could be quiet power.
Yeah, I agree. And I really want to chime in with a quick story. I have somebody very close to me that works in a federal job that is very male dominated. And, she tells me some of her horror stories. And I said, well, ask for help. I can't. That's a sign of weakness. And I said, strong, powerful women collaborate with other women and ask for help. I said, that is just you feeding in and buying into the culture you're in. make an impact, make a difference, and ask for help. And that is now the culture that she is working on creating, is a more, yeah, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to do that. For years, she has been beaten down to weak people ask for help. And it broke my heart. And I said, now, strong women and strong people ask for help. Because if you want to go far, go together. If you want to go fast, go alone. Mm-hmm. I think going together is fast and is more fun and brings more value to others. And I love the fact that this talks about, women. And it really comes down to, and my book is coming out soon. I'm one giant run-on sentence. So a lot of editing happening. And it's called Standing in My Power Even When I Was Shaking in My Shoes. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean power and ego. There is no ego here. It's about standing up for who I am, being vulnerable, reaching back and pulling the next one up to stand next to me and stand strong.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, and Jeannie, thank you for sharing that, because I think, again, it shows incredible vulnerability, which is what we're talking about here today, the way Brigitte kicked it off. I think that, as we're talking through some of this stuff, it's a remembrance too. We've got different generations here all together. We're not going to go through the ages again, right? We're not going to talk about that. But I think it's a really interesting dynamic, because when we look at where we are in our lives, specifically, for me, for instance, in the last probably 3 or 4 years, I've been taking in more information and more historical background of where women have been over the course of history in terms of home and leadership roles. And it's a fascinating journey when you really start to look back even to the 60s and the 70s of the role that the woman played in the house versus work. And when we talk about inclusion and we talk about diversity and where we are today and the fact that we're still fighting for it, it's not a surprise, because it hasn't been that long since we've been fighting for our voices and our places in the workplace. But you add to it it's like this perfect storm that's taking place, where not only are women coming into these key leadership roles, not because we weren't allowed in before. Quite honestly, women weren't going into leadership roles because they didn't think that they could. So now we see more of us coming in. But then you also add that perfect storm coming in where there is a change in leadership behavior that is being forced upon organizations by product of younger generations coming in. So you're going from this boomer style of management, which is a position of power, down to really having to embrace a cultural change that talks about empathy, vulnerability, finding our own voices. Doesn't matter what gender or where you work in the workplace, but having the ability to participate in the conversation. So I think it's a fascinating thing when we look back through the history of not only where women have come from. There's a couple of episodes that I'll have Kendall share in the links below, because I think as women, when we watch them and we see where some of our spots were only 30 years ago, 40 years ago, it can really make you appreciate where you are today, but show you how hard others have had to work before us to kind of get where we are today, and the importance of using your voice, and the importance of standing up for yourself, and importance of, one of the points that Kendall brought up earlier was to take the podium woman style. And I just think that resonates for me a lot, because it's like you just have to stand up and you've got to find your voice, and you've got to ask for what you want, ask for help, and just find that confidence.
Amy, I absolutely love that. And I'm so utterly grateful that I grew up with 2 extremely strong aunts, and they were wearing pantsuits back in the 60s and 70s. And my aunt was one of the top people at the IRS, when that was not heard of. And there's even a gentleman that's down in Florida with my dad, and she was his boss. And he said he hated it because back then men didn't answer to women, and it was very uncomfortable for him. And then my other aunt was one of the top leaders, and she's still kicking, and she's 88 years old, and she is amazing. She was in charge of the union for the Postal Service.
Wow.
So that for me was a really good role model. Find a role model, right?
Yeah, Jeannie, I think that's great because my journey coming up through where I am in my world today, when I was younger, it was stay-at-home moms or family that worked in the mills or the factories. And I said I wanted to be different. I wanted to be a secretary. I wanted to learn how to use a typewriter and answer a phone. Yes, I'm dating myself a little there. Because I didn't have some of those role models around me. And one of the series that I watched, I'm not going to remember the name of it right now, but I will share it with Kendall so that everybody here can check it out. It was one season only, which disappointed me. I think it was Good Girls Revolt, actually, on Prime. And it was about these women who worked in supporting roles to writers at national papers. And it's because it was perceived they couldn't write, when in fact they were the ones writing the articles. Instead, they were in the typing pool or in the research pool, and they were drafting the articles, but the men get the bylines on them. And you watch this journey, and it's scary to think that these women still held their power and were able to come forward. And now here we are today. Can you imagine this dynamic 40 years ago taking place? Yeah.
And I'd like to add a little different spin on this perhaps, but energetically, this time that we're living in right now, we are here as, and I'm going to use the word divine, the divine feminine and the divine masculine. We are here to heal all the dysfunction that has happened coming up to this time. And as we're able to stand in our power as women and be heard, there's so much happening and so much going on, and there's so much change that is a result of all the learning and all of the experiences that we've had to date. I worked in a very masculine dominated world for 35 years. It was the same company, family owned. So, I know how Kendall feels with the family thing. And it was almost like I was invisible and I was the one doing all the work. So like that show, I was behind the scenes in front of the computer, crunching the numbers, putting it out there for everybody. And, I finally said, enough's enough. And the change is happening now, and we are the change.
Mm-hmm. The way you said that, Cindy, it's like, it reminds me also just of the stay-at-home moms, the women that are staying home, and they're the unsung heroes and wishing that they were doing different or more in their husbands. And I'm not saying that this is prevalent everywhere, but I would say there's a good majority of the population out there where the women feel unseen, even at home, the biggest job of the world. And it's, I hear that coming through with you with the job that you had, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I living in an environment where my dad started the business. It's been, the people and the working with clients are male. It has been a personal journey for myself to find my own voice and power. And I know, especially for a lot of businesses that we work with, because most of the time the assumption is that the next generation male or firstborn is going to take over the business. And there are a lot of amazing women out there who are stirring it up, and they're showing that they got the grit, they got the power, they're aggressive, they want to make things happen. And it's just a very interesting environment out there. And what I have to say for myself is the best thing that I ever did for myself and my growth was to find really strong women to connect with, that one would coach and mentor me, would be my friend. And we're just amazing examples of standing up and making stuff happen. So that's something I would encourage anyone who's out there listening or watching. If you don't have a tribe, find a tribe.
We can be the tribe.
That's right.
Love it. I love it.
We'll take you on.
One of my proudest moments as a mom happened recently, and you will all, I think, will really identify with this. One of my proudest moments for my son, who has the 8-month-old baby I was watching today, is for my son to become the stay-at-home mom so his wife could work. because it was the right decision for them, not just monetary, but he's very high in nurturing and she's very high in knowledge. And that's just a story for another day. However, it just made sense for them to balance it out. That was one of the proudest moments because he doesn't feel, emasculated. He's like, oh no, this is the way to do. My parents did this growing up. Dad worked, mom worked, dad worked, whatever worked for us kids is what they did. And when my son did that, I'm going to tell you, I mean, you can see my eyes, it brings a tear to my eyes because that is the way I raised him, to see that's okay. That's okay.
Confidence.
That was a proud moment.
I love that. And I love what you said, Jeannie. And I want to plug into what Cindy said, because there's definitely a shift over, when you said healing the feminine and healing the masculine, we hear a whole lot about toxic masculinity and we hear a lot about feminism. When I look back at feminism back from the 70s, it was literally women trying to tap into their masculine energy and not really tapping into their feminine energy. They're trying to be something to get that change, to question the status quo. And when we are questioning the status quo and when we want change, we sometimes want to start somewhere that is more known rather than introducing something that's completely new, right? But we are doing that, right? We're literally severing that. This is the old, here's the new. Change is uncomfortable, and it takes people like us, like right here, and the ones that are listening and watching, to create that uncomfortable state to become the new norm, and to question that status quo. And I'm really happy that we get to heal in that sense, and that we get to create that new norm.
Awesome. Yeah. So we're getting close to the time. If there was one thing that you would want to leave the listener or the watcher for them to hear, what would it be? Amy, we'll go with you because you're the next step next to me. And then you pass it to me.
I think so. I think that one thing I would probably leave them with, going back to the article, because I like the 5 things that are in there, it's really reframing your ideas about power and remembering that you are your own power and you are in control of that. Don't fall into the stereotypes, don't fall into any perceptions, but identify who it is that you want to be as an individual. I think off the heels of what Brigitte was just saying, we try so hard, or may have tried so hard, to flex in areas that were uncomfortable. So maybe trying to take on the male persona in our careers and then being somebody completely different at home, it creates this conundrum of sorts of who we are as people. Whereas when you can find that power and reframe your idea about what that is, you can be the same person at work as you are at home. And let me tell you, it's a lot less stressful and a lot more empowering on both sides of the fence if you're able to do that. So I would leave everybody with reframe your ideas about power and own it. Brigitte?
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on that, because 2 words that come up for me is authenticity and congruence. And when you can lean into what Amy just said and stand in your own power and be who you are and be okay with who you are, oh my gosh, it is A, refreshing, and B, it takes all the stress out, because now you don't have to twist and be like that, maybe to fit in. Who cares? Be you. Cindy.
I love that, Brigitte, be you, because that's one of the gifts of age and maturity, is that you get more comfortable being you in your own skin. And that's something so incredibly beautiful and so empowering. And if I could leave, that's the nugget that I would give to anyone. Be comfortable in your own skin.
Jeannie?
Always do your best and don't compare yourself to others. Your journey is your journey. It's not Cindy's, Brigitta's, Jeannie's, Kendall's, or Amy's. And when you can do that and live your passion and live your truth, and again, be you, life will just start to fall into place. And the one with the most flexibility in the end has the most amazing life.
Yeah. And I'll leave with, in my environment, I lost myself for a really long time. And I had someone ask me, what are you good at? What do you enjoy doing? And I had no idea because I had lived the perceptions and what other people thought I was for so long. And so what I recommend, if you're in that space, take some time to think about, what do you really enjoy doing? What do you get lost in time doing? Is it working in the garden? Is it being creative? Is it numbers? Is it project? I mean, there's so many different things that when you think about what do you get lost in doing, and that's one of your strengths. That's a passion of yours. And just begin to write those down on a notebook. And there's other tools out there. There's StrengthsFinder 2.0. There's tons of resources that you can look into to help find what your strengths are and then play to those strengths. If you guys have any questions that you want of us, or that you want to have us cover, or questions for anyone specifically, there's an email address down below. Please reach out to us and we'll cover the topic, and we'll reach out to you as well. Thank you so much. We appreciate you listening in. Do you have something you would like to chat about with us, or maybe chime in on? Contact Amy, Brigitta, Jeannie, Cindy, or Kendall at the email addresses listed on the screen, or submit a topic you would like for us to discuss by emailing Kendall Rawls at kendall@rawlsgroup.com. We would love your feedback. Thank you to our 5 excellent coaches for sharing insight and perspectives and showing the power of vulnerability. Your Tribe is produced by the Rawls Group Business Succession Planners.